The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Manhattan's most exclusive private hospital, Preston Memorial Medical Center. Inside the executive wing on the 23rd floor, Dr. Alexander Preston stood motionless, his reflection barely visible against the storm-darkened skyline. At 42 years old, he was a monument to success, a cardiovascular surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives, a billionaire whose name adorned hospital wings across 3 continents, and a man who hadn't shed a single tear in 15 years, not since the day he buried his wife. The intercom on his mahogany desk buzzed. "Dr. Preston, your 7 p.m. is here," his assistant announced, with the practiced neutrality that came from working for a man who showed no emotion. "Send them away. I'm not taking new patients. Sir, it's a special case. The board requested." I said no. His voice was ice. Alexander Preston didn't explain himself, didn't justify his decisions. He simply made them, and the world bent accordingly. But the world, as he would soon discover, doesn't always bend. Before we continue with this incredible story, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our viewers around the world. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next emotional journeys we have in store for you. Hit that notification bell, and let's continue. The following morning, Alexander arrived at the hospital at 5 a.m., as he had every day for the past decade and a half. The early hours were his sanctuary, time when the building was quiet except for the rhythm of machines keeping people alive. He preferred machines to people. Machines were predictable, logical, and they never asked him how he was feeling. "Good morning, Dr. Preston," the voice came from behind him as he stepped into the surgical wing. He turned to find a woman in navy blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her brown eyes meeting his without the usual nervousness most staff displayed around him. She was perhaps 30, with a face that suggested she smiled often, though she wasn't smiling now. "You're new," he stated flatly. "Nurse Elena Rodriguez. Started yesterday. I'll be assisting in your surgeries." She extended her hand. He looked at it, but didn't take it. "I didn't request an assistant." "No, but the board felt it was necessary. Your last 3 assistants, well, they didn't last long. They were incompetent." "Or maybe," Elena said, lowering her hand without apparent offense. "They were human." Something flickered in Alexander's chest, something he quickly crushed. "If you can't handle the pressure, Nurse Rodriguez, there's the door. I have standards. Either meet them or leave." "I can handle pressure just fine, Dr. Preston. The question is, can you handle someone who doesn't tremble when you walk into a room?" For the first time in years, Alexander found himself slightly off balance. Most people either feared him or wanted something from him. This woman seemed to do neither. He turned away without responding and walked toward his office. That afternoon, they performed a quadruple bypass on a 67-year-old patient with severe coronary artery disease. Alexander moved through the surgery with mechanical precision, each motion calculated, each decision made in fractions of seconds, and Elena matched him step for step, anticipating his needs before he voiced them, her hands steady, her focus absolute. "Sutures," he demanded. They were in his hand before he finished the word. "Clamp," already there. 6 hours later, when they closed, the patient's heartbeat was strong and steady. Alexander stripped off his gloves and walked out without a word of acknowledgement. Behind him, Elena looked at the unconscious patient, then at the other nurses. "Is he always like that?" one whispered. "Like what?" Elena asked. "Like a robot. Like he's not even human." Elena studied the doorway where Alexander had disappeared. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think he's a robot. I think he's terrified of being human." Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Alexander and Elena worked together on increasingly complex cases. A transplant patient whose body was rejecting the new heart. A teenager with a congenital defect that 3 other surgeons had declared inoperable. A mother of 4 whose arteries were so blocked that one doctor had sent her home to die. Alexander saved them all, and Elena was there for every surgery, every brutal hour, never flinching, never complaining, never asking him for the warmth or recognition that seemed so important to everyone else. But she watched him, and what she saw troubled her deeply. One evening, after a particularly grueling 18-hour surgery, Elena found Alexander still in his office at midnight. The city lights stretched out behind him like fallen stars. He sat at his desk, motionless, staring at something on his computer screen. "You should go home," she said from the doorway. "I don't have a home. I have a penthouse where I sleep 4 hours a night. That's not healthy." "I'm not interested in healthy. I'm interested in effective." He didn't look up. "Why are you still here?" "Same reason you are. Patient in ICU. The transplant from this morning. I wanted to check on her. She's stable. The monitors would alert us if anything changed." "Some things monitors can't measure, Dr. Preston." He finally looked up, his gray eyes cold in the dim light, such as fear, loneliness, the need to know someone cares whether you live or die. She stepped into the office. I went to sit with her, held her hand, told her she was going to be okay. Waste of time, she was sedated. Maybe, or maybe some part of her heard me. Maybe that matters. Sentiment doesn't save lives, Nurse Rodriguez. Skill does. But what about after you save them? What kind of life are they going back to? What kind of life are you living? She moved closer and he noticed she was carrying a small paper bag. When's the last time you ate something that didn't come from the hospital cafeteria? That's not your concern. She set the bag on his desk anyway. My grandmother's empanadas. She makes them every Sunday. Says food made with love feeds more than just the body. Alexander stared at the bag as if it were a bomb. Take it away. Why? Because I don't need it. I don't need anything. Everyone needs something, Dr. Preston. Even you. You don't know anything about me. I know you haven't left this hospital before 8 p.m. in the 6 weeks I've been here. I know you take every difficult case, every impossible surgery, like you're trying to prove something. I know you're brilliant and dedicated, and you save lives every single day. She paused. And I know you're the loneliest person I've ever met. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Get out. Dr. Preston, get out. Elena held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but the empanadas are staying. Throw them away if you want, or don't. She walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I don't think being alone is what you want. I think it's what you think you deserve, and you're wrong. She left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Alexander stood in the silence, his hands clenched at his sides, his breathing carefully controlled. Then his eyes fell on the paper bag. Almost against his will, he reached for it, opened it, and the smell of home-cooked food filled his sterile office. He took one empanada, bit into it, and tasted something he'd forgotten existed: care. Someone had made this with attention, with time, with the belief that it mattered. He ate standing at the window, looking out at the city, and for just a moment, the armor around his heart cracked ever so slightly. The next day, he found Elena in the break room. Your grandmother, he said without preamble. Thank her for the food. Elena looked up, surprised. You ate them? They were adequate. A small smile tugged at her lips. High praise from Dr. Alexander Preston. He almost smiled back. Almost. Don't make a habit of it. Of cooking? Too late. It's genetic. Of caring what happens to me. It's not part of your job description. No, Elena agreed. It's part of being human. You should try it sometime. He left without responding, but something had shifted between them. Subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. The breakthrough came 2 months later, on a bitter December evening when snow fell soft and silent over Manhattan. They just finished a surgery on a 7-year-old girl named Maya, born with a heart defect that Alexander had spent 6 months planning to repair. The surgery had taken 14 hours. It had been flawless. Maya's mother, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to afford the medical bills, waited in the recovery area. When Alexander came out, still in his surgical scrubs, she stood up so fast she nearly fell. The surgery was successful. Your daughter will make a full recovery. The woman's face crumpled, and she began to cry. Great heaving sobs of relief and gratitude. She tried to hug Alexander, but he stepped back instinctively, his body rigid. Thank you, she gasped. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. You gave me back my baby. You gave me back my whole world. Alexander nodded stiffly. The ICU nurse will keep you updated on her recovery. He turned to leave, but Elena was there, blocking his path, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Wait, she said softly. Nurse Rodriguez, just wait. She turned to Maya's mother. He won't tell you this, but Dr. Preston operated on your daughter for free. He covered all the costs himself. The mother's eyes went wide. What? But I thought the charity fund. There is no charity fund, Elena continued, her gaze locked on Alexander's face. There's just a man who can't stand the thought of a child dying because her mother can't afford to save her. Alexander's jaw tightened. That information was confidential. Was it? Or did you just not want anyone to know you have a heart? I have a heart. I operate on them every day. You know what I mean. The mother was crying again, trying to thank him. But Alexander was already walking away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Elena followed him. Dr. Preston. Wait. He spun around, and for the first time, she saw something break through his carefully constructed facade. Anger. What do you want from me, Nurse Rodriguez? You want me to smile and accept gratitude? You want me to feel something? Yes. Yes, I do. Because you're not a machine, Alexander. You're a human being. And you've been pretending you're not for so long that I don't think you remember how to be one anymore. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me. Tell me why a man who saves lives every day acts like his own life doesn't matter. Tell me why you work yourself to exhaustion and live in an empty penthouse and won't let anyone close to you. Tell me why you haven't cried in 15 years. The last words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Alexander's face went white. Who told you that? One of the older nurses. She said you used to be different. Before, Elena stopped herself. Before what? Say it. Before your wife died. The silence that followed was so profound that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Alexander stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, his face a mask. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Her name was Sarah. She was a pediatrician. She believed in saving children, in making the world better, in love and hope, and all the things that turned out to be lies. He looked at Elena with eyes that were suddenly, terrifyingly empty. She was 8 months pregnant when she was hit by a drunk driver. They brought her to this hospital. To me, Elena's breath caught. Oh God, I operated on my own wife. Did you know that? I tried to save her, tried to save our son, and I failed. I stood there with my hands inside her chest, and I felt her heart stop, and I couldn't do anything. His voice cracked. I couldn't save the only 2 people who ever really mattered. Alexander. So don't tell me about being human, Nurse Rodriguez. Don't tell me about feeling things. Because the last time I felt something, the last time I let myself care, it destroyed me. And I swore that day, standing over her grave, that I would never let it happen again. I would never care, never feel, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. He turned away. And I've kept that promise for 15 years, until you showed up with your damn empanadas, and your questions, and your refusal to treat me like the monster I've become. Elena stepped closer, her voice gentle. You're not a monster. You're just scared. I'm not scared. I'm smart. Caring gets you killed. Love gets you destroyed. No, Elena said firmly. Not caring is what's killing you. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're just slowly dying inside. And Sarah, your wife, do you think she'd want this? Do you think she'd want you to spend the rest of your life alone, refusing to feel anything? Don't you dare tell me what Sarah would want. You didn't know her. You're right, but I know you. And the man I've been working with for 3 months, the man who pays for surgeries out of his own pocket, who takes impossible cases because he can't stand to see people suffer, who works 18-hour days not because he loves his job, but because he's running from his pain. That man is not someone who's stopped caring. That man cares so much, it's eating him alive. Alexander's carefully controlled breathing was becoming ragged. Stop. Why? Because it hurts. Because feeling something after all these years is terrifying. Because you might actually have to admit that you're still alive, still human, still capable of... Stop! The word came out as a roar, and then something broke. After 15 years of perfect control, of mechanical precision, of refusing to let a single emotion touch him, Alexander Preston shattered. His legs gave out. He sank to the floor of the hospital corridor, and a sound came from him that Elena had never heard a human being make, a sound of pure, unbearable grief that had been locked away for a decade and a half. Elena knelt beside him immediately, and this time, when she reached for him, he didn't pull away. He collapsed against her, and the tears came. 15 years of unshed tears, of swallowed grief, of denied humanity pouring out in great, racking sobs. She was pregnant, he choked out. We were going to name him Daniel. We had the nursery ready. I was going to teach him to play chess. Sarah used to joke that he'd be a doctor like us, that we'd have a whole family practice, and then one moment, one drunk driver, and it was all gone. Everything gone. Elena held him, her own tears streaming down her face. I know. I'm so sorry. I couldn't save them. What kind of doctor can't save his own family? The human kind. The kind who did everything possible but couldn't control the impossible. Alexander, what happened wasn't your fault. I should have been there earlier. Should have insisted she take a car service. Should have what? Seen the future? You can't control everything. No one can. And spending 15 years punishing yourself won't bring them back. He pulled back, his face wet with tears, his eyes red and raw. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything other than this. Elena took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then learn, one day at a time, one feeling at a time. Let yourself be sad. Let yourself be angry. Let yourself be human again. What if I can't? You can. I've seen you, Alexander. I've seen the way you look at your patients when you think no one's watching. I've seen the gentleness in your hands when you operate. I've seen you bring people back from the edge of death. You have so much life in you. So much care. You've just been too afraid to let yourself feel it. They sat there on the cold hospital floor, Alexander Preston finally allowing himself to grieve, to feel, to be broken. And Elena stayed with him through it all, her presence steady and warm. When the tears finally subsided, when the storm passed, Alexander looked at her with new eyes. Why do you care? You barely know me. Because someone needs to. Because you're worth caring about. And because I think maybe you've forgotten that. I've been terrible to you. Cold. Cruel sometimes. Yes, Elena agreed. You have been. But I've also seen who you really are underneath all that ice. And that person is worth fighting for. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it, he said, I'm tired. I'm so tired of being alone. Then don't be. Let people in. Let me in. He looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time since they'd met. And what he saw there, compassion without pity, strength without judgment, care without expectation, was something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for in 15 years. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Do what? Feel things. Care about someone. I've spent so long shutting everything down that I don't even know where to start. Elena smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. Start small. Start with this. Tomorrow morning, when you come to work, say good morning to someone and actually mean it. When you finish a surgery, let yourself feel satisfaction. When a patient thanks you, accept it instead of walking away. That's it? That's how you begin. One small human moment at a time. Alexander nodded slowly. Then, surprising himself, he said, Would you have dinner with me? Not here in the hospital. Somewhere with actual plates and real food and conversation that isn't about surgery? Elena's smile widened. I'd like that, but on one condition. What? You let yourself enjoy it. No thinking about work. No planning the next surgery. Just be present. Be there with me. I'll try. That's all I'm asking. They stood up together, both of them aware that something fundamental had shifted. The brilliant, cold Dr. Preston, who had walked these halls like an emotionless machine, was gone. In his place was someone raw and uncertain, but real. Over the following months, Alexander learned to live again. It wasn't easy. There were days when the old instinct to shut down, to retreat into coldness, was overwhelming. But Elena was patient, and slowly, gradually, Alexander began to remember what it felt like to be human. He started accepting dinner invitations from colleagues. He smiled at patients, really smiled, and learned their names instead of just their symptoms. He went to Elena's grandmother's house for Sunday dinners and discovered the joy of family, of laughter, of belonging. And one evening, 6 months after that breakthrough in the hospital corridor, he took Elena to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. I haven't been here since the funeral, he admitted. As they stood before the headstone, I couldn't face it. Elena squeezed his hand. You can now. Alexander knelt down, brushing snow from the marble. Hi, Sarah. It's been a long time. Too long. His voice was steady, but tears ran down his face freely now, no longer something to be ashamed of. I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry I shut down. I thought not feeling anything would hurt less, but it didn't. It just made me half alive. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I met someone. Her name is Elena. She's stubborn and compassionate. And she refuses to let me hide behind my walls. I think you'd like her. I think you'd tell me I'm an idiot if I let her go. He smiled through his tears. You always did have good judgment about people. I'm not going to forget you, Sarah. I'm not going to forget Daniel. You'll always be part of me. But I'm going to live again. Really live. The way you wanted me to. The way you'd want me to. He touched the cold stone. Thank you for the years we had. Thank you for showing me what love could be. And thank you for sending Elena to remind me that my heart, the one that beats in my chest, still works even when it's been broken. Elena wiped her own tears as Alexander stood. He turned to her, and his voice was clear and certain. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Probably somewhere between the empanadas and you forcing me to admit I'm human. But I love you, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. I'm done pretending. Elena smiled, radiant even in her tears. I love you too. And I'm so proud of you for getting here, for finding your way back to yourself. They stood there in the snow, holding each other, and Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Peace. A year later, they married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Maya, the 7-year-old girl whose life Alexander had saved, was the flower girl. Her mother watched with tears of joy, grateful for the miracle that had given her daughter life, and the doctor who had found his own. Alexander never went back to being the cold, emotionless surgeon who had terrified staff and shut out the world. Instead, he became something better, a healer who understood that medicine wasn't just about fixing bodies, but about honoring the humanity in every person who crossed his path. He established a foundation in Sarah and Daniel's names, providing free cardiac care to children and families who couldn't afford it. He mentored young doctors, teaching them not just surgical technique, but compassion. He went home at reasonable hours to have dinner with his wife, and on Sunday mornings, they visited his first family's grave together, keeping their memory alive while building a new life. And every night before he fell asleep, Alexander Preston let himself feel grateful for Elena, for second chances, for the tears he could now shed freely, for the laughter that came easily, for the love that had seemed impossible. He had spent 15 years believing that not feeling was strength, that isolation was safety, that controlling everything meant controlling his pain. But a brave nurse with a kind heart had shown him the truth, that real strength came from vulnerability, that real safety came from connection, and that real control meant choosing to live fully, even knowing it could hurt. She had taken a man who thought he was dead inside and reminded him that hearts, whether surgical or emotional, could always beat again if given the right care. Dr. Alexander Preston had been a brilliant surgeon who saved countless lives. But the life Elena saved, his own, was the one that mattered most. Because once he allowed himself to feel again, to cry again, to love again, he discovered something extraordinary. The man he thought had died 15 years ago had only been waiting for someone brave enough to bring him back to life. And in learning to live again, Alexander finally understood what his wife would have told him all along, that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, it endures, and it always finds a way back to those who are brave enough to open their hearts, even after they've been shattered. The billionaire doctor who hadn't cried in 15 years learned to weep freely, and in those tears he found not weakness, but the strength to become the man he was always meant to be, someone who saved lives not by shutting down his own, but by living fully, loving deeply, and never again forgetting that being human was the greatest gift of all.